Hey everybody, Cindy Daychuk here with Queen Bee Creations, and we are going to have some fun with this dresser. Now, I have already done a base coat. So, I've taken Sandy Blonde from DIY Paint. So this is all going to be DIY paint, and of course, it's all available on the website, queenbeecreationshome.com. But what I'm looking to do, okay, oh my gosh, old bones. And I was clearing out a storage locker yesterday with a friend, and it was a lot of lifting. I'm very sore, so this is not the day to be on the ground painting. But we're gonna do something a little bit different for me. I'm using colors that are a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. So, you know, if you followed me, you know, I like me some color. I like some brights and things. And I do some neutrals, and this is gonna be a little bit neutrally, I don't think that's a word, but you're with me, right? Because what I want to do is I want to use one of the new IOD transfers. And this is the Desperado, which is kind of a Western theme. And again, a little bit out of my wheelhouse. And this is all in kind of black and white. So what I'm looking at doing, let me open this baby up so you can kind of see roughly my plan, and because I do sort of want to pencil in where I'm going here. Right, so what I'm thinking, and this has got like tremendous, you can see on the back a lot of the different patterns. I'm going for the big horn guy, which is 2 stencils wide. So there's page 1 is going to be here. And I've got these curving drawers, and I've got a gap there to contend with, which is just, you know, going to make my life a little bit more difficult, but it's not always straightforward pieces, and we'll see how that goes. But so I've got these two sections that are going to go across here, across the front. And I'll kind of worry about the whole built-in drawer handles and things as I go. But what I want to do is have a little bit of an idea before I start doing the rest of the painting about where this is going to fit, so that as I'm adding in some of my other colors, I know how far to maybe be taking them down, because, so I need to leave a little bit there, and I don't think I'm in the middle. And technically, I could just measure this, right? I could just get a ruler and kind of measure, and that's just making too much sense. So instead, I'm kind of looking at it coming down here, roughly to there, roughly to here, and up, down to where? Down to here. Okay. So, the transfers are going to be one of the last steps. But I just wanted to have an idea, because I'm going to be bringing some color down and shading it in kind of a bit of an oval sort of look. And this is going to be going kind of into that center area. So I wanted to have a bit of an idea about how that would look. All right. So we're in kind of the neutrals. So I've got Sandy Blonde, and I have layered chocolate here. Now, I will admit, I think I opened this once to do some stenciling, and I have never painted anything this color. So that's like chocolate cake batter. Okay. And I've never really used it on a piece, so I'm not even sure that I know exactly what kind of brown color that's going to look like. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, I have a bit of crinoline here too, but as you can tell, there for a while. Okay, there we go. Oh my goodness. It's been in there long enough that there's no way it's going to squirt out the bottom. That's just anchored in there. But I have that a little bit as a bit of an accent. And I have my misting bottle. So I have my mister, and I have a flat brush. So I use these a lot. This is a Debbie's Design Diary. It's synthetic fibers, which I like a lot. But I am kind of two-toning this a little bit with the darker color up higher. Oh, that's gonna be chocolate, all right. Let me get more of the brown, I think, and maybe I'll add the cream in after. Now, I do have down here other colors. I've got Mermaid Tail in Old 57. I have Cowgirl Coral. I've got some Bohemian Blue. So I am looking at maybe adding some of those in after in kind of waves of color or in sections more than anything else. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my chocolate first, kind of getting the outline of it. And I'll do that around each of the sides as well because they're inset. I have the border and then the inset. So I'm going to get that chocolate on first, I think, and then I will look at blending. So all that I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of take this chocolate color just kind of loosely here, down to the edges. And let me show you what I'll do here, just so that you understand what I'm saying, loose. I'm going to feather it here just so that it's not harsh, it's not flat on there, so that when I go to blend some other colors in, it's easier to feather some of those colors in as well. So I'm going to get all that chocolate on, and then we'll come back with our mister and start blending some of the other colors, because I think I'm going to want to add some of my blues and corals in at the same time. So, okay, that's my new plan. All right. Oh, it's good that you come along for my thought processes here, folks. So one of the things that I will do is I will pull this out and just make sure that I get the rest of that inside edge. I'm getting these edges okay, but I will make sure that those are all chocolate as well as I go. Except for in here where I'll just kind of feather this in a little bit. So that's all up to date, but this is what we're gonna get, is this kind of feathery look for now. And then we'll start playing with adding a little bit more color. And we get all of our paint on before we start playing with our transfers. Okay, you can see that the top looks like this, except that it's got some turquoise and some coral added. I decided I wasn't going to blend. I was going to do this in kind of a choppy sort of palette-y look, and I kind of like that look. Now it's going to get heavily sanded as well, but bear with me here. I am just taking little palette knives, and so I'm going to start with the turquoise, and I'm just going to kind of rub it across using just a little bit of paint and creating little patches of color. So you can see very little on the knife, not on the back, and I'm just going to kind of lightly sweep it in spots. And I'm going to do this on all of my chocolate. So it does mean that I will pull out the drawers and kind of come underneath here and do some of the same treatment, right? So in those edges in between on the top and the bottom, just so that I get that consistency. But I'm not looking for this to be even. I'm not looking for this to kind of flow regularly or anything. I'm just looking for swaths. I don't know, swaths of color? Would that be a way of saying it? And again, bearing in mind that I'm also going to be adding a little bit of my coral. So let me get underneath here a little bit and in behind. And I'm taking off more of the paint before I even try and put it on, so I don't end up with a huge big section there. And don't forget your sides. And I just want to apply it in the direction of the paint, the direction that the paint's moving. So I'm not looking to do sweeps down there because my paint is coming across this way, right? So that's enough of that. Okay, so one of the things that convinced me to do this is because my Cowgirl coral in here is super thick, right? So I'm kind of digging it out. It's nice and chunky, and this is beauty. So that's what convinced me to do this rather than kind of watering this down, which I can do and is an option. I decided to roll with it and use that thickened paint to add on that look of texture, that age, that, gee, it's all been worn down. It's gonna help when I sand it as well. It's gonna smooth some of that color out, but it's kind of the look that I'm going for here. So, and remember, we still have transfers to add. We've got a lot more that's gonna be happening here. So it is not necessarily going to be a sedate piece, but we're bringing in some of those other colors of Sedona, the West. I mean, whatever you want to look at it, right? But, okay, I just couldn't do totally neutral. It just didn't work for me. So that's how I'm applying the paint, like this. And I'll bring you back when I start sanding. And I am going to sand the whole piece before I add my transfers. And I may do a little sanding afterward. I don't know. We'll see once they're on how I feel about it. And we're going to go from there. So I'm just going to play applying the paint. But you can see that I'm leaving it patchy. I'm not doing full coverage. And at this stage, I am not blending. So I'm not adding water and blending it out, which is still an option if I decide when this is finished that I'm not digging it, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm carrying on, and then you can come on back and see when we start doing some of the sanding, which I will do by hand so I can control it better. I brought you up to the top to see the sanding because I think it's going to be easier with a flat surface so that you see kind of where I'm going. I have 320 grit sandpaper and I'm just wrapping it around a sanding block to make it a little bit easier. I'm not doing a major sanding in the middle. That's it. I'm doing a quick, smooth, I'm just trying to smooth that out. It's around the edges that I'm gonna do a much heavier distress. And you'll start to see big wear marks coming up where I'm exposing that under layer of color, and I am softening out all of these swatches of color that I added in. See how much gets taken off. And then we're going to take a rag and we're going to dust it all off take all that dust off, because when we go to wax it, we don't want to be sealing any of that in. So you can see just how worn I'm looking for this piece to look. This is the layout for the top, and I'll bring you back when I start doing the big drawer fronts. I have them laid out over there. So I kind of cut apart pieces, laid them out where I needed them to go, and then I'm going to be applying those transfers onto here. Now, I have not sealed this, and you know, there's one thing that IOD transfers love, and that is to go onto a slick sealed surface. This is not. So I have experienced some sections where it is not adhered very well, and that's because I'm going on just that dry paint. It's kind of a little bit chalky, it's not slick. There could be oils coming through. Sometimes the paint isn't fully dry or cured, or there's dust that I just didn't get off, and that's preventing it from happening. So in those places, I do use a couple of little tricks, and I'm gonna give you a clip to show you that. But all that I am doing here now is just simply using the tool that comes with your package. You know, I've removed that white paper backing. This is now in direct contact with my paint, with my piece. And so I am just simply rubbing that transfer to get it to release. I do find, because it's not a sealed surface, that it takes a little bit more oomph. It's a technical term, I'm sure, oomph. But it takes a little bit more to get it to release, but it has been releasing. And when I hit trouble spots, I just kind of keep going over them a little bit and let it go. If it's going to be particularly difficult and not release at all, so you can see I'm starting to get some release happening here, then I will maybe leave it, and I will use my handy dandy trick to get it to release afterward if I have to. But you can see that I'm still, even though this isn't a sealed surface, I'm still getting the transfer to it here, and I will be sealing over top of the whole piece, which will also seal my transfer in. So I'm gonna get this all stuck on. I will show you the little trick that I used on the side, because I had some sections that were not sticking to some of the paint, and then I'm gonna come back when I'm doing the drawers, because you'll see how I have chosen to deal with doing the transfer over multiple drawers that curve. I would like to say the transfers always go on perfectly, but they don't. And usually it's not the transfer's fault, it's the user error. And in this case, I made the decision to attach my transfer onto unsealed paint. So my paint is dry, but I have not sealed it. We know the transfers go onto a sealed surface or on glass like a breeze. So if I did a polyacrylic on this, let it dry, I wouldn't have any trouble. But I don't want to seal this piece with polyacrylic. I want to seal it with wax, and I want to do like a dark wax probably. So I've risked not having all of my transfers transfer properly. Only because when it's just paint, it could be that your paint is still slightly damp. It could be that there's some oils that are coming up through the piece. There could be some dust that's still in the piece. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you might get part of your stencil, or sorry, part of your transfer not transferring. And that's what I have across here. Now, I don't mind the worn look because the rest of the piece looks really worn. But I wanted to give you guys, I want to use this as a teaching moment and show you guys what I do when I get to these situations. And, you know, let's say on the top, I've got a big piece and I want it all to transfer. How would I deal with that? So one of the ways that I do it is that I take a spray adhesive, and any spray adhesive would work, so don't agonize over brand. And I will spray the back, and then I will cut this apart, or you can, cut it apart ahead of time, like this little tiny piece over here. I really don't want to have to put glue all over the whole thing. But I put a spray adhesive on it, let it get tacky, lay it on my piece where it needs to go, let it sit for just a second or two, and then rub it off. And it sticks. The glue makes it stick. Now, I use spray adhesive only because it gets super tacky super quick. You could put a bit of top coat here and in the spots, and let it dry on here, and then try to reapply it. Or you could put a thin coat of Mod Podge on here, or some other kind of glue that you have available. That would work too. But let me just move these guys out of the way so I don't spritz them inadvertently. Okay, so yeah, it's a little globby. All right, so I've sprayed the back of this. You can see it's kind of glistening, and it's got, let me grab a little cloth. It's got a little bit more glue on some of those areas where my transfer isn't. So I'm just gonna kind of wipe that off because I don't need the glue going every which way. But then I take it and I line it back up with where it should have been. Stick it down. Take my transfer tool and start rubbing it on. And oops. You can see how quick, okay, if I'd stop re-sticking the thing back on. Okay, I got one that doesn't want, and all the rest did. And that's where the blue is, so I'm okay. So you saw how much the transfer was still stuck on here. I just have this little bit now. So just thought that while I went to fix this, might as well bring you on board to show you one of the ways that if you're having troubles getting yours to stick, don't despair. That there are ways to be able to work around that, as with anything. So these are my 3 drawers lined up together, and what I'm looking at doing is cutting my transfer in the lines in between so that I can kind of have the pattern continue down. So if I look here, if I'm lining these up with these drawer handles, and this just works so that I only have one drawer handle to worry about as it relates to my transfer. And I'll use these upper ones to line up the transfer, and then everything kind of flows from there. So I am at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, line 6. And this is where the IOD transfers are awesome with these grid lines, because it helps you be able to do things like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to cut straight across that line, regardless of where it happens to fall. I'm still keeping that backing paper on so that my transfer's not sticking to anything while I work to line things up. So, line 6 on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One's going to come up here. And then I want to see where I need to cut the next one. So I am 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom. So I am just going to cut these out, line them up, and then one at a time, taking the backing paper off and starting from the top down. So I will attach the left one, then the right one. I want these to line up perfectly. Then I'll do this one and this one. So I'm always kind of working in a way that it's not going to mess up my alignment significantly. So I did take out a ruler to kind of roughly make sure, and I'm not doing it to the exact millimeter, but I am just kind of making sure that it is roughly centered. And I'm there. Okay. Because once I got one on, I will use it as the major guide. So let me just make sure. Okay, and straight or not, everything plays off of this one. So I'm just going to be rubbing and applying that transfer the same as all the others. The lettering is just a little bit pickier because, you know, you've probably experienced it when you've got like a big patch of flowers or something. As soon as you start getting some of them off, it just starts peeling back. Each of these letters, each of these words is just attached by a little thin line, in which case these are all kind of virtually individual little items, and so it takes a little bit more work to get it going. So it's not hard, it's just going to take a little bit more because you don't have any of those big groupings of transfers to be able to work from. It's now time to begin sealing our piece. Look how cute this is. I'm loving this. But before I do, I like to take a piece of the backing paper, shiny side out, and I like to burnish, which just means kind of rub over top of all of the transfer. Sometimes when you're doing the transfer, you know, you're rubbing it off and more comes off, like it goes really fast. Sometimes those pieces aren't as adhered as well. Oy, Lord, that was tough to say. As you may think, because it's kind of peeled, it's released from the backing paper, but it hasn't necessarily attached itself as fully to your piece as maybe you would like or you would want. I've had people sometimes that have said that, you know, they've sealed their piece and then they start getting some of the transfer releasing. And I really think it's because they missed this step. They don't burnish it. And it looks like it's all stuck, but it really hasn't attached itself fully to the piece. And then you seal it and you start getting elements of the sealer seeping underneath that unsealed transfer, and it starts curling up and releasing. So this becomes kind of an important part of the process, is just to kind of take that take that backing paper and just kind of rub over the whole transfer. That's it. It doesn't take any more than that, but that can make a world of difference to the longevity of your transfer of your piece. I am now just going to seal this with some clear wax. So I've got some DIY clear wax. I've just got it on a brush. You could use it on a wax brush. You could use a lint-free rag to apply it, whatever method you prefer. I think that there's some people that even use some sponges. So you can see already that this darkens my paint. It's kind of like taking the paint back to what it looked like when it was wet. As it dries, it will lighten again. It will not get as light as this again, though. So the nice thing about it is that it gives you a really good idea of where you've waxed, where you haven't waxed. Let me take this up a little bit so you can see as well. It deepening and darkening those other colors that we've added. So it's giving a little bit more of a contrast. So what I will be doing is waxing the whole piece and letting it dry, and then I will buff it up. And then in essence, you know, we're done. I was debating whether or not I wanted to add some dark wax, and I'm going to wait and see when I've got all of this wax on, whether or not it needs it. Really, the dark wax would kind of add a sepia tone to this if I did it over the whole thing. Seeing this darken now, I don't think I need to do that. But if I don't like some of this edging and I wanted to soften it, that's where the dark wax would help. Because I could take it in around those edges. So we'll see what it looks like, and definitely if I decide to do that, I will come back at you. But I am just going to take my brush and I'm really going to push the wax around. I don't like adding a ton of wax. If, you know, some people wax heavy, in which case apply your clear wax, take a lint-free rag and wipe it all down and leave it. You don't want to have any kind of heavy clumps of wax drying on your piece at all. You want that to kind of dry nice and smooth. So I'm going to complete this. We'll let it dry, buff it out, and see what it looks like when it's all done. I'm really kind of digging it right now, though. I've now decided I am going to take some dark wax, and I am just lightly dabbing my brush into the dark wax, and dark wax is actually brown. So I have that same chip brush that I had my clear wax on, and while this is still a little bit moist, I am going to take some of that dark wax, just kind of over those edges a little bit. And if I need to, I have my rag to be able to kind of soften it out a little bit. But I just want a little bit about that fading, you know, to kind of happen around here, rather than it being a little too stark. I'd like it to just kind of have a little bit of that aged sepia tone kind of seeping into the edges. So I'm going to go all the way around there, all the way around the top and on the two sides. And then, then I'm going to let it sit overnight and cure up a little bit before I buff it. Yeah, subtle, but I like it. You can see the difference on this side versus that side. It just kind of looks a little bit more aged, a little bit more worn. Perfect. here's our finished piece. Now, I always say, you know, it's not necessarily a typical style for me, but I don't ever really do the same thing twice. So I don't think I have a typical style. This particular transfer, this is the Desperado transfer from IOD, one of their new releases out, just kind of screamed for something that was a little bit more Western. Now you could have gone a little bit more into, you know, some of the terracottas and the turquoises, had a completely different look, and it would have been awesome. So I think that there's a ton of places and tons of ways to be able to use this transfer. And obviously not just on furniture. I mean, even this with some of the other items, you're gonna make some awesome signs. But I wanted to do something using a couple of colors that I don't typically use. I had never used the layered chocolate, and Sandy Blonde is not one that I typically use, but I wanted to get kind of a bit of that Western feel, and maybe this is pulling out of my Texan roots. My dad was from Texas, so, you know, maybe it's making me feel really at home and comfy, you know, on a psychological, but I love it. I think it's just really fun. I'm going to take pics for you so that you can see a better image of the top. The sides are done as well with the transfers. I've done some of the borders, top and bottom on the sides, and you know, like this, ooh, like this one is all the cactuses. Oh, you guys can't see anyway, the cactuses. The other one has a cactus and a small buffalo or bison, whichever it happens to be. I don't know if there's a difference or not. I think, you know what, again, I just love it. It was kind of out of my wheelhouse, and I didn't think that Desperado was going to be a transfer that I would use often, but this challenged me to kind of get out of my comfort zone, and there's so much potential for it now. I mean, I've totally flipped. I've totally changed my mind. So sometimes I think it's good to take something that you're not immediately gravitating to, challenge yourself to use it. That's what I did with the Desperado transfer, and see where it takes you, because it's in those moments of discomfort that we tend to learn the most. If we're always staying comfortable, then we're just working with what we've always got. So there was a growth curve on this one for me, and I love the results. So as always, drop in your comments. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think of this, and yeah, let me know if you challenge yourself with something outside of your comfort zone. I'd love to hear that too. Paint, products, all available on the website, queenbeecreationshome.com. Looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Don't know what I'm going to be up to, but it'll be a surprise for you too. Until then, take care.